Welcome back to Performance Process. My name is Ronan McLaughlin and I'm your host as usual for a two-part series delving into a challenge that I completed last week. And that was, well, it's something I've dreamed about for a long time, a solo unsupported circumnavigation of the island of Ireland, by bike of course. Over 10 days and more than 3,000 kilometres, I faced storms, injuries and challenges that went beyond anything I've experienced before. But this wasn't just a personal goal. The ride was dedicated to raising awareness of the realities faced by those living with severe food allergies, inspired by my own daughter's journey. And in this episode, well, I'm joined by Kaylee to take you inside the highs and lows of the adventure, the practical lessons learned, and the deeper purpose driving me to complete this challenge. This is the story of what I dubbed the Traces of Ireland. So, Kaylee, welcome to the show, and I'm going to hand over hosting duties to you here now, and you can take us through what it was that I tried to do last week.
Ronan, it's good to be back. I'm not going to take us through anything. I'm going to ask you questions because all I was seeing was the occasional Instagram story update and then you dropping somewhat frequently into a WhatsApp group with myself and Johnny to say how absolutely effed you were. That's the extent of my knowledge of what's happened so far. So I'm going to be learning along with everybody else. So what it was a solo, unsupported 3,000 kilometer circumnavigation of Ireland, which is, I mean, I think that alone is maybe puts a picture in people's minds. Can you describe in a little bit more detail the motivation behind this? You mentioned it there in the intro. But this is the crux of the whole thing, right? Like you were doing this for something more than just, I want to go out and challenge myself, which is that's a lot of why we do many of these things. This one had a bigger, broader purpose, right?
Yeah, in hindsight, I think if it had just been a challenge to myself, I would not have got through it. Based on prior ultra events that I've done and some of the mental challenge around those, and considering I'd never done anything more than a single day before, and this was 10 days long, and never once did those doubts creep into my mind or those I don't want to be here thoughts. The personal motivation here, really made the difference. And that stemmed from, well, my 6-year-old daughter, Sophia, she's got severe food allergies. She's allergic to tree nuts, peanuts, sesame, and lentil. And so I wanted to do something that would sort of raise awareness around food allergies and try to do my bit for just supporting some of the research that's ongoing there. And so while the idea of a circumnavigation first popped into my head last year, and unsurprisingly not inspired by Lachlan Morton's ride around Australia, because when Lachlan Morton does things, you don't really, or at least I don't tend to think, oh, I'd like to do that. I could do that because
usually
Lachlan
the opposite.
Morton does, yeah. And his was, considerably longer around Australia. But I think it was, and not to say that this made me think, oh, if she can do it, I can do it. That wasn't the thought at all. It was just Molly Weaver announced her planned attempt to circumnavigate Britain. And it kind of dawned on me at that point, like, oh, this is a thing more than just something that Lachlan does. Yeah. And Molly is currently taking on her challenge, trying to break a 40-something-year-old record, riding around the coastline of Britain. And that's making for a fabulous challenge to follow as well. But that all happened around November time or so, and I had spent a while trying to put together a supported record attempt ride around Ireland, and for one reason or another that wasn't coming together. And just as it had all but given up hope on being able to do something like this, I'd spoken to countless companies who I thought should have been interested in supporting an event that was raising awareness around food allergies, especially in the food industry, and wasn't even getting so much as a response. And so I'd practically given up until I started by chance meet with Lael Wilcox in Chicago back in April. And she was telling us all about her circumnavigation of the globe, which just another level entirely, even from what Lachlan did. And I was expecting to hear like this massive plan they had put in place and all the work that had gone into it and all of that. And basically it sort of boiled down to actually she just got on her bike and went for it. And that sort of, hearing about all the challenges that she faced along the route and all just made me think, well, what am I doing making this so complicated? I just need the start and finish line is at my back door. All I need to do is get on my bike and go.
Yeah.
And so that sort of, it didn't initially become the circumnavigation. Initially, I sort of pivoted to do the Transatlantic Way bikepacking event, which is just the west coast of the island. But the closer I got to it, the more I realized I just couldn't get this idea of circumnavigating out of my head. And so then eventually I decided, I'm going to cycle to the start down the east coast and then do the event up the west coast, and I would have my circumnavigation. But sort of, weaved in through all of that was just the idea of a circumnavigation also just like resonated so much more for what I was trying to do in terms of raise awareness. And so what I wanted to do by circumnavigating the island was, to do a lap of the island. If I wanted to raise awareness, to me, it sort of made sense. Well, if you lap the island, potentially you can speak to everybody within there and raise awareness that way. Obviously, it was going to be a sort of an eye-catching challenge, and so that would get people talking as well and get people interested, which was, again, the main motivation here. Quite often with Sophia's allergies, what we face is just a lack of understanding, and less often, but sort of more worrying, is like it's quite often trivialized that people just think, it's not that serious, you've made this up or whatever. And I can tell you haven't witnessed reactions that food allergies can cause anaphylactic shock, which can be fatal. It's not something made up. It's not a choice. Nobody would do this by choice. And so I also wanted to sort of foster the idea of better inclusion for people with food allergies. And so the idea of circumnavigating the entire island includes everybody within. And then the idea of, the Transatlantic Way is such a complex route navigating the West Coast as well. I thought that was quite apt because it is often quite complex navigating food allergies and reading every label and, trying to ascertain whether or not a restaurant or a cafe or whatever we can trust them to provide food for Sophia. Quite often we just don't. And then finally, the idea of unsupported. While it wasn't initially the plan, the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. It was like, as a family with food allergies, we quite often feel unsupported, as much of the community does, be that in terms of, again, just going out or choosing foods, or even just going to the supermarket looking for food, or right up to government and healthcare level. And we're lucky enough here that Sophia gets the EpiPens that she needs to carry everywhere provided to her, but I know that's not the case in the States where you are, Kelly, and
no.
People have to pay for these things at an extortionate cost. But at the same time, we do feel unsupported here, in that there's immunotherapy treatment that Sophia may be able to avail of, which the governments north and south of the border here haven't yet rolled out into the healthcare system, and many families are having to travel to the UK to get this treatment. So it just, the unsupported aspect of it felt rather poignant as well.
Well, and you chose to follow her diet throughout the entire thing.
I did, yes.
I mean, I imagine that there's not a whole lot of things in your house generally that are going to potentially cause a problem, right? But still, to do this, I mean, you and I have spent so much time on this very podcast talking about nutrition and how optimizing that can have a massive difference on the way that you can perform. One, why did you choose to follow her diet? And two, what were the sort of challenges that you then ran into while you were out there, just getting enough calories in while being sort of allergy safe?
Yeah, the motivation behind that was just sort of, I mean, she's 6 years of age, so she probably won't see it this way, but at least in my head, it was like I wanted to inspire her that her food allergies never need to hold her back. And so doing the biggest, most difficult challenge I have ever considered, never mind done, while following the same strict diet that she does, seemed to be the best way of doing that. Now, I have to admit, there was a point when I was crippled with injuries and unable to do more than 100 watts, and it took me 5 hours to do 76 kilometers, where I deeply regretted having told Sophia that I was going to do this whole thing, avoiding the same things as she has to, and the fear was I was going to have to come back and say, oh, actually, I couldn't do that. That was very, very difficult. And actually, when I said that to her just before I left, I was like, that might have been a mistake to say that. Maybe I shouldn't have told her that. But I had said it, and so I was determined that I was going to complete the thing, injury or not. Because it was important to me to sort of highlight to her that your food allergies don't need to hold you back. And I mean, she's sick. She probably won't comprehend it in that way. But hopefully in future she'll look back and go, actually, that was a kind of cool thing that my dad did. And cool challenges that provided. I mean, it made every stop at every shop that I had to restock at quite a lot more time consuming, even for myself. I'm like, totally okay with the whole process. I'm so used to reading ingredient lists, but just first of all the nutritional products that I would have typically used, like especially the bars and that, the energy bars that we typically use, they were just not an option. I mean, they all, even if they don't have nuts in the ingredients, they all may contain, because they're probably made in the same facility that manufactures bars that do have nuts in them. And so that can quite often be a frustration, but at the same time, we would rather, quite often it feels like a get out of jail card for manufacturers just to stick a label like that on it. But at the same time, we'd never take a chance with something that has a may contain warning on it. And we would prefer that if there is any potential for it to contain something, that it is highlighted, because the consequences of cross-contamination and getting it wrong are, again, it can be fatal. So
may contain must be some of your least favorite words in the English language, huh?
Yes, it is. I mean, especially sometimes you just look at things and you go, I mean, if your rice pudding may contain nuts, then I mean you're doing something seriously wrong here. Does your hamburger may contain raw chicken or something? I don't think so. You can find a way to control that, but I'll stop before I start venting too much. But at the same time, it's never a question. If it may contain, we just take zero risks with that sort of thing. Which can quite often be heartbreaking, because Sophia, as a kid, she sees something she wants, and then you check the label and you go, I'm sorry, honey, it may have nuts or something. And she's great. She like totally understands every time, but you can see the disappointment in her face and that. Like, so
I think anybody who's had young children has experienced that emotion, and you have to do it a lot more often than I'm sure the rest of us do. I want to talk training and preparation and things like that, but really briefly before we do, you had a donation goal. You were raising money for the Natasha Allergy Research Foundation, and you wanted to raise essentially 10 pounds per kilometer, right? And that totals out to 30,400. We should plug that real quick, because you're still taking those donations. Where can people go do that if they're listening right now and they want to drop a couple quid in?
Well, if they're listening right now, there will be an article to go alongside this podcast, and we'll have a link within that article. There's also, it's a Just Giving page, so every penny that is raised goes to the charity. And we've also created a website for the challenge. It's tracesofIreland.com, and there's links all over that page to get to the donation page. But I think the easiest way is just the article on escapecollective.com that goes with this podcast. And just to put it into, we've just tipped over £19,000 raised so far, so 62% of our target, which is just a phenomenal figure. Just blown away by all the support that we've got there. It's not the goal we set out to get yet, but it's still absolutely incredible. And to put it in context, like £10, just £10 provides allergy education packs for a school. And so that's a heck of a lot of schools that we could have provided education packs. £25 would train 50 teachers to support allergic kids. £100 covers a life-saving dose of treatment for a child, and £1,500 can fund 6 months on the Natasha Allergy Foundation's clinical trial, which is literally life-changing for the kids who get on that trial. So it's if we had our target, we could have 20 kids get this life-changing treatment,
which would be amazing. So go do that. If you're listening right now, hit pause, go take care of that. Let's talk training preparation.
That'll not take long, because there wasn't very much of
it. This is what I was going to say, is like, I keep a fairly close tabs on all of you, and like who's working when and the other things, the things that we do as a regular business. And I can't say I saw a ton of training happening with you, Ronan. So Yeah, explain to me as you say. This kind of was spurred along by that chat with Lyle, right? So, and the decision just for like, let's go for it, which means you didn't spend
Hmm.
8 months doing nothing but physical prep for this effort. So what could you do in that amount of time, and with the sort of limited weekly hours that you would have had to put work in? What were you
Hmm.
doing? Time crunch cyclist.
Um, to put it in perspective here, Kelly, I did more in the 2 days riding to the start line of the Transatlantic Way than I did in the entire month of April put together. And by day 2 of the Transatlantic Way, so day 4 of mine, somewhere through day 4 or 5, I'd done more than I had done in April and May combined, both in hours and kilometers. So yeah, I guess a couple of stats first of all. Like a total ride time for the 10 days was 124 hours. Total kilometers, it ended up being 3,098 somehow, rather than 3,040. But there was the day I started leaving from home here in Derry, I rode to the start line and then I rode back and then I rode to Sophia's school because she had school sports day that day and I didn't want to miss sports day. And so I spent 2 hours waiting there before I then had to ride like 300 kilometers that day. And so, yeah, had all that not happened, I would have had an extra day starting a day earlier. But long story short, I averaged 335 kilometers per day if you take the injury day out of it, with over 30,000 meters of elevation gain, over 64,000 kilojoules of work done. It was a massive, massive challenge, the kind of which I don't think you can really train for that anyway. You could do a massive block of endurance, but if you replicated that in training, you'd be wrecked and you wouldn't be able to do it anyway. And so I just kind of did what I've always done, which is just focus on training the engine as much as I could. I got a couple of long endurance days in the 6 weeks prior to the event, but apart from that, it was mostly just Zwift sessions early in the morning, or a ride here and a ride there. But it was extremely limited in what I had time to do, and I had spent 8 months. This was the only thing I wanted to do this year. This was the only thing I was planning for. But yeah, you work us too hard, and so I didn't really get much training time.
I'm not sure that's totally accurate.
No, I just
no. But what it sounds like to me is this. We talk so much about high performance on this podcast, and this was human performance. This was like regular guy performance, and I think that is I don't know. It's probably more accessible to a lot of the folks that are listening out there. Which is like, how do you fit this stuff in? How do you prioritize what you're going to do if you've got this limited amount of time? And I go through the same things. Listeners out there, they will have done the same things. They've either got kids, they've got a stressful job, they've got whatever else going on. You don't have all day every day to go out and ride for 6.5 hours and then sit with your feet up, right? Like that's just not the reality. My longest races of the year my longest rides of the year tend to be races for exactly the same reason you're talking about, which is like, I don't have time to go ride for 3.5, 4 hours all that regularly. So given that, how did you prioritize? So like, let's give me some specifics here. So you're 6 weeks out. You said you do a couple endurance rides. You're looking down the barrel at this thing that is like the hardest physical endeavor that you have ever attempted. What did those days look like? You're like, all right, I got a free day. I got a hall pass. I can go. I can take as much time as I want today to go ride. What does it look like?
I think I did. So I spent a week at the classics and then a week in America, so a bit of time in lieu to take. And so one Friday I set off and did like a 10-hour spin with a serious amount of elevation gain, just to sort of see, right, I've only had limited training. I've been training, lots of sweet spot and intensity work in that to try and, just develop the engine as much as I could.
Yeah.
Is that working? And I got to the end of that 10-hour ride, as fresh as you would expect to be after 10 hours on the bike. Did pretty little the next day, but then on the Sunday, so 2 days later, I did a huge tempo session, did like 3 hours at a, pretty high intensity, high tempo sort of effort. And again, felt incredible. I was like, okay, I might not be able to do the endurance I would ideally like to do, but I know I can. I've got 25 years of training, first of all, in the legs. I've got plenty of experience and know how to get through this sort of stuff. And now I'm clearly in, I'm not going to say I'm in good condition, but I can sustain those sorts of 2 hard days
Yeah.
in a very short period. So long as I'm smart about this bigger challenge, I will get through it. So long as I stay at a moderate pace, so long as I keep myself fueled and hydrated, so long as I just generally look after myself,
Yeah.
I will get through it. And so I intentionally tried to rest up as much as I could in the 2 weeks beforehand. There was nothing I was going to do then that was going to make me fitter for the challenge. And I tried to put on as much weight as I could, knowing that would probably stand in my favor also. Skipping ahead a bit, I lost like 5 kilos over the 10 days. Yeah, I don't recall ever seeing myself as lean as I was when I came back from this. I basically had faded away. And that's kind of what happens if you ride for, 12, 15, 18 hours
Yeah.
a day and do like 10,000 kilojoules of work.
You
But
can't eat enough. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, like, there isn't a banana left on the west coast of Ireland. I've ate them all, and Haribos are sold out everywhere.
I mean, yeah, right, like a sort of allergy diet or no, there's just no way you're going to get enough calories in doing that. So the I want to talk sort of high points and low points when you're actually out there as well, and the Achilles thing, which I think we maybe hinted at earlier, but so you had an injury one day, and frankly, multiple kind of makes sense given the prep, right? Like you could prep the engine, but the chassis was still slightly underdeveloped, probably.
Yep.
And that would be like if you were going to go do. I remember talking with Rupert Guinness, for example, about Race Across America, and that was his big thing. Was like you want the engine to be tuned up, but mostly you want like your neck to survive and things like that, right? So, talk to me about the Achilles injury, how and why you think it happened, and then kind of how you got through it.
Well, maybe before delving into that, just on, like, I was hyper paranoid about Shermer's neck and my neck giving in and that. So I'd spent, like, I wouldn't say I'd given up training time, but I'd certainly devoted a lot of time, maybe just before bed each evening, for basically since October, November of last year, to core strengthening, conditioning, doing a lot of resistance band work on my neck and trying to strengthen that as much as possible. And not.
You're just training to be an F1 driver, right? That's what you were secretly training to be an F1 driver.
I was highly inspired by the F1 driving, yes. But I didn't have a single issue with my neck, didn't have a single issue with my shoulders, my back. None of that was an issue. So I think that worked.
Yeah.
In hindsight, perhaps I should have extended that to my to my legs also, and done some strength and condition there. And I was doing some, but by no means as much. But if I was to guess where the Achilles injury came from, it would be one of two things. I first of all developed like some patellar issues with both my knees. It would sort of alternate between, was it the left knee or the right knee? And so I think maybe just like, subconsciously protecting those, I maybe caused an injury in the Achilles, and probably more accurately, I think it was probably to do with my cleat placement, in that I'd gone a certain direction with my bike setup and my position in that, which we delved into in the tech version of this podcast I recorded with Dave earlier that'll go out alongside this. But long story short, I went for a further back saddle position, and I also prefer just, subjective feeling, cleat position ever so slightly further forward onto the foot than would maybe be ideal. And while that feels good and I like that over the shorter rides I was doing, I think by day 4 or 5 that maybe started catching up with me. And if I was dropping the heel maybe a little too much, I'm thinking that's where the Achilles issue probably came from.
You put out a call on Instagram for a physio, right? So how did that work? Did you find one?
Perhaps a little context there as well, in that I'd got sucked into racing the transatlantic way, which I really should not have done. I was lining up against guys who do this. This is the discipline within the sport that they do. And they also were starting fresh on day 1, whereas day 1 for me was day 3. But still, I got sucked into racing them. At the end of the first day, I was sitting like second place when I stopped for the night. Got the stop all wrong. Thought I was stopping for 3 hours. Ended up being 6. Went into the second day. Still got sucked into racing. And by day 3, I was still there. Like, I was joking back and forth with for third place, third, fourth, swapping back and forth depending on where we stopped in that. But second place was still within sight, and I had decided I was going to ride through the night to try and clog off more kilometers, get close to the finish. I also wanted to experience riding through the night, but it was like going into literally the middle of nowhere in the west of Ireland, and got to about 2 a.m, and my Achilles had gone a couple of hours earlier, and I just literally couldn't pedal a kilometer further, literally middle of nowhere. And I found this little stone. I don't even know what it was. You're going to have to check out the photos on my Instagram, because it was like a monument thing. It was outside a primary school or something that also had a Garda, or more commonly known as a police station there, but there was like a rural police station. There was nobody in it. And so I just got out the emergency blanket, camped there. Next morning was the Sunday, which was also Father's Day here in Ireland. I put the call out on Instagram, and David Gordon, God bless him, he gave up his Father's Day morning to come out and to treat my Achilles on a stone wall at the side of a car park.
I'm looking at the photo right now. So yeah, it's a sort of like old stone. It looks like a tiny church or something, like just visually.
I'm wondering, do they use it in Christmas time for like like a crib, sort of thing?
I mean, it's a lovely stone structure. Whoever built it was good at making stone structures. But then there's a photo of you, laying on a mat with like a foam roller. Your foot's on a foam roller, and getting your Achilles kind of played around with. But he was able to fix you. That's the incredible. Like, Achilles stuff is sort of notoriously slow to heal, and it's like an ongoing issue, right? Like, so how did he fix you in like 4 hours? How does that work?
Well, I would say for the rest of that day, it was actually worse. To the point that it had taken me 5 hours to do 76 kilometers, and I got to this little village, and Phil and Camille, the video and photographer guys, were at this village already, and they were like, maybe you should consider just stopping and resting here for the night and seeing if a bit of recovery helps it. And lo and behold, that did help. And definitely, the work that David had done at the side of the road, and the work that he had given me to do in terms of stretching and rehabilitating it as much as possible there and then, definitely worked, because the next day I wouldn't say it was fixed, but it was manageable. But I mean, going back to that stone thing that I slept in for a bit, just one typical, if you want to sum up Ireland in one experience, I was lying in this thing at 2 o'clock in the morning, wrapped in an emergency foil blanket, feeling awful sorry for myself, but also nodding off to sleep. And I must have just been on my phone or something, because a car drove past, must have seen the light from my phone, stopped, and like reversed back and drove in to me. This big fancy brand new like Audi Q5 is like, oh God, what is this going to be now? I do not need any more hassle here. And long story short, this older gentleman, he must be in his 70s or 80s, got out, asked me what the heck I was doing there. I explained the whole thing to him. He said, I'll be right back. And I was like, I'm fine. Don't worry about it. Just leave me. I'm going to go off to sleep. I'm like, thanks, but no thanks. Anyway, long story short, he came back half an hour later with a blanket, a pillow, a flask of hot tea, some cheese sandwiches, some Jaffa cakes. Yeah, he really properly went to town and looking after me. So big shout out to Jack. Thank you, Jack.
Love it. Jack, maybe not a frequent listener, but you never know. We could pull him
Probably
in.
Not, no. He definitely thought I was bonkers for being on a bike at all, never mind so far from home.
I think that brings me to one of my sort of a frequent question when I chat with folks that do things like this, which is, it's full of these sort of emotional highs and lows. And you've already talked about some of the highs and lows, but what kind of surprised you emotionally? Because you've done hard endurance events before, but this was a different level, and it's a mental challenge as much as anything. So what surprised you on that front, or did anything surprise you on that front?
Yeah, definitely. The most surprising thing to me was just, again, there was like not once did like any doubt or negativity or what am I doing here creep in, and like, everything I've done. It could be a 1 hour club race, and at some point I've been like, that just wouldn't be bothered. And that, despite this being the longest thing I've done, by an immeasurable amount compared to anything else I've done, never once did that. And I can only put that down to just like the cause and the why more so than I wasn't. It was the first thing I'd done where I wasn't just out there. I was looking to break a record, or I was looking to challenge myself, or I was looking to do this, that, or the other. It really meant something extra, and as such, even like in the training before, you mentioned earlier going out for a 4.5 hour ride, and I was trying to do some of those and just been like so bored riding for the bike for 4.5, 5 hours, and yet like I look back now and I can't believe that on the first day of the transatlantic way I rode 440 kilometers. It was like 17.5 hours on the bike, and that a big part of it also was just like the roads that I was riding. It was just like I love this island so much, and just to be able to experience so much of it on the bike, see it in a way that you're not going to get that experience just driving around it. It's the one thing that kept going through my mind on that day 3 for me, but first day of the transatlantic way, was just how much of a privilege it was to get to ride these roads, and then also to do it for such a great cause. Like, it was just, yeah, I can't. I mean, the organizer, every time he caught up with us at a checkpoint, so he had 3 checkpoints, and he would ask you for 3 words to describe your race so far. And the first one I wasn't expecting, so the first time he asked me at the first checkpoint, and I was just like, I don't know, hilly as curse word. And by the end, he asked me on the finish line, like, your 3 words, and I was like, bucket list stuff, because so much it was just like, I thought I knew the island. You look at my Strava heat map, you think I've been pretty much everywhere in the island. And every day I was uploading to Strava, and I have it connected to wanderer.earth, so it tells you how many new kilometers you've ridden. And every day it was like 250, 300, 350 new kilometers of roads that I'd never ridden before, and areas that I just did not know existed. And yeah, I thought I knew this island, but there's just so much more to it. It was just absolutely mind-boggling, some of the scenery.
Who else did you meet? You mentioned David the physio. You mentioned Jack with the Jaffa cakes in the middle of the night. Who else did you encounter?
Well, I mean, Phil Golston, who listeners may not know, but he's done quite a lot of work with us back in cycling tip days and that. And he was along for not all of it, but for about 5 days videoing it. Camille Lasso was there photographing it. So most of the great photos that you've seen on my Instagram are his work. And then just the sheer number of people that came out to ride with me. At some point I lost count and lost names and all sorts of people who I'd met, but those people who came out to support me, came out to ride with me, came out to cheer us on, and obviously everybody who donated and sent me messages of support and all, it did also make such a huge difference. So thank you to everyone. I think the most random was at the end of that first day of the transatlantic way, so it was already pitch dark at night. I was duking it out with some I can't remember his name now, but a German fellow who was in second place, and this car just comes up alongside me, and there's bananas hanging out the window. It was like 11 o'clock at night, and I was like, oh, that's just what I need right now, thank you, I'll take those. And then I pulled into the next town, which is about half an hour later, and walked into the chip shop and ordered myself a pizza. And this guy came up and he insisted on paying for it, and I thought he was a guy organizer who ran the chip shop or something. Turns out it was a guy who was handing bananas out the window, and just like we had happened to choose the same chip shop, and he then bought me a pizza. Dave Lappin was his name, so thank you.
Another Dave. How will these people just find you on Instagram, or are they escape members? Like who was who came up and said hi? Yeah.
A lot of escape members, yes. A lot of people following. I had a tracker for the entire thing that was you could follow on Primal Tracking for my entire Traces of Ireland challenge. But then I had a second tracker from the Transatlantic Way, and a lot of dot watchers following that race were coming out, and no doubt supporting a lot of riders. But they certainly made their support known to me as well, so it was much appreciated.
To return to the nutrition aspect, because nutrition is so crucial for these long events, right? How did it feel, or did it feel different riding on essentially a restricted diet? I mean, you mentioned the fact that you couldn't eat bars, you couldn't eat a lot of the things, you just ate a bajillion bananas, it sounds like. How were the guts through that process? How did it go?
The guts and all were fine, but it definitely became more and more challenging throughout. Again, you couldn't just like walk into the shop and buy anything. There were options, but it very quickly became right. I just need to go. As much as I want to go and get some cake, there was one period where like the only thing I needed was cake, And I just was walking around this big, huge Tesco supermarket and couldn't find a single cake that may contain something. And that was just, it was so frustrating. But, there were options that just took more time to seek them out. They weren't always what I wanted. Quite often I ended up eating microwavable packets of rice. Yeah. So at one point I was carrying 5 or 6 packets of those, and I would just rip the top off of those and eat the packet of rice, not microwaved. Oh. I think they're already cooked. You're just, when you put them in the microwave, you're just heating them up. Yeah. I think. But anyway, that's what I did, rightly or wrongly. Another time I was I had a packet of cornflakes and a liter of milk and stuffed into my Albion Vests thing. It was just absurd at times. But I think the low moment in terms of that was the day that I was injured and had to call it short and stayed in this little village that night. And there was a lovely pub downstairs from the B&B. Went in there, asked them would they put the Formula One on TV, and they did, which was nice.
The real reason you stopped.
But then
let's
the real reason I stopped. But then on the menu there was literally one thing I could have, and it was the one thing of the list that I wouldn't have picked. I can't even remember at this point what it was, but it was that was the only thing on the list that I could have had. But I mean, at the end of the day, it was a challenge for me. But had I got it wrong, it wasn't. I don't have food allergies like this. Yeah. And so, being inconvenienced by not being able to choose what I wanted or whatever wasn't, it's not an issue in the grand scheme of things.
Do you feel like you kind of put yourself in your daughter's shoes a little bit? I guess by that I mean she's 6, and when you're 6, you view the world really differently and probably a lot more simply than we do as adults, right? And one of the things about a challenge like this, an endurance challenge like this, is it does kind of simplify your existence for a little while, and so it feels almost like you step back into a bit of a more of a childhood. So did it feel like that when you were riding? Am I just reading into that too much?
I think it felt like I was in her future shoes, and that at the moment we make all of her food choices for her. As you would do for any 6-year-old child. Yeah. And we do all that work. And so that wasn't really new, but it kind of somewhat depressingly, if I must be honest, it kind of gave me a glimpse into what her future is going to be like if she doesn't grow out of these. And, at least a couple of them she will not grow out of. She was previously allergic to eggs also, and she's growing out of that. And I mean, talk about courage. Yes, for 5 years we've been telling her, eggs, you can't eat eggs, you're allergic to eggs, we need to avoid all contact with eggs. The last time she touched or consumed a tiny piece of egg, she passed out, and we had to give her an EpiPen and all sorts to bring her around. And then back in the beginning of April, she had to go into hospital and eat a full egg. And she did it she was afraid, but she did it. And that was, talk about courage. That's just unbelievable.
I remember you going to do that. Yeah.
Yeah, and we didn't just do it to see what would happen. You do other tests that suggest that now it looks like she's growing out of that allergy, but we need to confirm it. And so I think it was more of a glimpse into her future, which unfortunately, there will be challenges there. It also if there's one other example, just where I felt unsupported, that little hut that I slept in. There was a bar that was open 500 meters up the road from there. And so at first I went into the bar and I was like, is there by any chance that you're also a B&B that I could rent a room for the night? And they were like, no. I was like, well, are there any B&Bs around here? And they're like, no. And I was like, can I sit here and feel sorry for myself for a little bit until you close? And he's like, well, we close in half an hour, but you can stay until then. And long story short, I was in the front bar and there was just me there. And then the barman who had been answering my questions went into the lounge area where there was seemingly a lot more people. And then I could just hear the conversation strike up, and the barman was explaining what I had explained to him. And then the customers of the bar were like, what the hell is he thinking coming out here in the middle of the night? He should have had this planned hours ago. What the hell is he doing out here with no accommodation for the night? And how are we going to help him? And it just kept coming back to, what is he thinking? What is he thinking? And then at some point I just cracked. I was like, and I walked in and I was like, you know what, guys? I was thinking, this was not part of the plan. 3 years ago, I was absolutely fine. I'm supposed to be riding to Clifton. Yeah. I had zero issues 3 years ago. This was I was not planning to get injured. I was planning to ride through the night. So, and then of course they like got all sheepish and they're like, oh well, let's see if we can do anything for you then and help you out. And there was nothing. There was nothing they could do. But it also just kind of At that moment it was just like
you're living in a different world than they are. They don't.
You're so much. You're so vulnerable in that situation. You're so at the mercy of other people, and that kind of that just struck me as sort of resonated with how you live with a food allergy. Like you can't just go into a restaurant and order anything, or a cafe and order anything. You have to check everything, and Sophia will see something she wants, and we ask the staff, Sophia here, she has these allergies. Does this food contain any of these ingredients? And they're like, oh, we've got a small kitchen and we can't guarantee anything. I didn't ask about the size of your kitchen. I asked what ingredients are in this thing. And, it's just these, the lack of support there. And I think what eventually will change that is, unfortunately, and I wish it didn't have to be this way, but unfortunately, the numbers of those with food allergies are rising all the time. I think there was it's doubled in the past 10 years and it went up by 5% in the last year alone. Yeah. And so at some point, just like as happened with vegetarian and vegan and gluten-free options, companies will recognize a business opportunity in providing allergen-friendly products. And that's probably what will bring about change in that. And it in some ways it actually, it's in no way as easy as offering a vegan friendly product, because any one of us could wake up tomorrow with an allergy to any food, literally anything. We could wake up tomorrow and be allergic to anything, despite having our entire lives been fine. And so, it'd be very difficult to make any promises about this is completely allergen friendly or whatever, but just that places would have more options and more information and cater better to us. The first cafe stop that I stopped in was just at Checkpoint 1, which is actually at the most southern tip of Ireland, and it's the only place I've ever seen where they had a whole load of food in a deli counter, refrigerated area beside the till, and below each one they had the name of what it was, so banoffee pie or whatever, and then every ingredient in it, and the top 14 allergens have to be highlighted in bold, and they had those highlighted in bold, and it was just so easy to just be able to read through that list and go, oh, well, that has these things in it. That's fine. None of us are campaigning for restaurants not to use nuts or cafes not to use sesame or whatever. We just want the information more easily accessible. And the way it was presented there just seemed to me so easy to do, but made such a big difference. And that's the kind of thing, we'd love to see more places do.
I mean, it does feel like it's trending in the right direction. I mean, I don't know if I've ever mentioned to you. So my dad has a bunch of food allergies. So I grew up in nothing. His were more like he'd eat something and have flu symptoms, right? So we never carried an EpiPen or anything like that. But he was wheat, gluten, egg yolks, and milk my entire young life, and so that obviously does severely limit the available options, particularly in the 90s when the only gluten-free options were horrible hard wassa crackers and things like that. And you think about the progress we've made with that particular type of allergy, right? That's, I think, probably one of the most common and obviously one of the least kind of deadly, but also, getting the flu in the middle of a restaurant and vomiting all everywhere is also not particularly fun. And we made huge progress in that space. And so I think that's certainly, you'd hope that we follow along with progress elsewhere in a similar vein, right? And that really just came down to, as you say, capitalism saves the day, right? People recognize the fact that that there were a lot of gluten-free folks out there who needed to be celiac, etc., and that if you made gluten-free bread, you could sell it. So you'd hope that the same thing happens over the next.
Yeah, I wish it was done for better reasons, but if that's the motivation, I'm perfectly fine with that.
It'd be nice. It'd be nice if humans were just nice, right? But humans are mostly wanting to sell things. So
just on that one other point you just raised there, the one thing we're continually reminded is that past reactions are no guarantee of future reactions. Yeah, and so not saying in your dad's case, but just generally speaking, someone could be listening and think, oh well, I've got a mild allergy to X, Y, or Z. that mild allergy could at any time. And I don't mean to scare people here or anything, but I think it's important because, again, so much of the messaging around allergies for years has just been this kind of jokey thing. Oh, it's funny, haha. But
Yeah.
again, you could have a mild reaction to something 10 times, and then the 11th time could be anaphylactic shock, which, again, if you don't have
Yep.
an EpiPen there or you don't have medical assistance, could be fatal. And even when you do have those things there, it can still be fatal.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we think his was maybe tick related because his allergies came on at all a similar time, and there's a tick in New England that has been giving people an allergy to red meat, for example, lately.
Wow.
Like like tick-borne viral something. I don't understand the science behind it, but it's a thing. Anyway, my dad is not the point here.
Wow.
I'm just saying that I've watched this in real time with a similar like food allergy, and man, you hope it starts to get better. Which brings me to the actual sort of like, I guess, question here. You mentioned some of the therapies that you're sort of essentially raising money for. Can you tell me a little bit more about it's oral immunotherapy is what's written down here. Can you tell me what that is and kind of why it seems to be working and why it's important?
The oral immunotherapy is one thing, and that's kind of what we've been calling for here in Northern Ireland, and there's similar campaigns in the Republic of Ireland, because that is available in the UK, in Britain. And so if Sophia, there's a lot of ifs and buts, but if Sophia lived in England, she may qualify to get this treatment that would, it's not going to get rid of her peanut allergy, but I always liken it to, if you were going to do a marathon, you would do some training, and the training wouldn't guarantee you would get through the marathon, and it wouldn't make it easy, but it gives you a better chance. And that's kind of what this oral immunotherapy does. It exposes the system to a tiny amount of the allergen, which you're hoping builds up a tolerance. And so, yes, Sophia also has asthma, and that may complicate whether or not she qualifies for the treatment. But the broader point is, it's in England, on the NHS. We're under the NHS umbrella here in Northern Ireland, and we don't have it. And when we are campaigning to bring that here, and similar campaigns are underway in the Republic of Ireland also, because at the moment families are having to travel and pay for this thing that, if they happen to live somewhere else, would be free of charge. And so, that's one thing. And then the Natasha Allergy Research Foundation are doing their own clinical trials also. And I mean, they're unfortunately, the existence of the foundation came about because Natasha tragically died having consumed a sandwich that didn't have sesame warning on the label. She had ate the sandwich unknowing she had a sesame allergy. She was on a plane, and unfortunately she passed away. And her parents have now set up this foundation, and they're sort of dedicated to just providing or increasing awareness, providing training, and also doing this research. And one of the parts of that research is this clinical trial, which again is a slightly different approach, but effectively trying to achieve the same thing and building up a tolerance. And the key here is that the younger you get this, the better chance there is of it working. And so I remember sitting a year and a half ago, and we were campaigning to bring this to the oral immunotherapy to Northern Ireland, and thinking, oh, Sophia has loads of time, and sitting with parents of kids who were 6 years of age at the time and knowing their time was running out. And now we're sitting in the same situation thinking, Sophia's time's running out. She needs to get this as soon as possible. But, if we're talking about change, it looks like now I'll have, along with the Natasha Allergy Research Foundation, meetings with government ministers here in Northern Ireland. So hopefully we can press on that again and bring about that change.
Remind me how much you've raised so far.
£19,059, 62% of the target so far.
All right. So we know how many thousands of people listen to this podcast. We need all of you to head over. Where can they go? Remind everybody.
Again, probably the easiest thing if you're listening to this podcast is just go to the article on escapecollective.com that goes along with this. I'm assuming we can put a link into the show notes here on the podcast also. That's maybe even easier again. But you may want to read the article that goes along with this as well.
Well, Ronan, you've done your craziest thing yet. But for a good reason, for a good cause. And I I mean, I love the fact that you just never even thought about stopping because, man, I was watching from afar. I was considering stopping for you. Like it looked really gnarly.
I had a lot of people message me sort of saying, you've already achieved so much. Don't let your own pride get in the way. And if,
Yeah.
don't do something stupid, and don't be afraid to stop. And I was like, noted, appreciated, thank you. But it was nothing to do with my own pride. If it had been just my own pride, I would have stopped 2 days earlier. So it was, yeah.
It's an incredible thing. Well, we got a documentary video coming out on this as well. When will that be? That'll be a little while, right?
I think that'll probably be towards the end of the year. Yeah, I'm not expecting that anytime soon.
So keep an eye out for that. Head over and donate. And make sure you check out the sort of sister podcast to this episode, sister episode to this episode, where Ronan talks all about the tech behind this effort as well. You had a pretty cool bike, pretty ridiculous bike, is maybe the way that I would describe.
Cool might not be the word that other people use.
Pretty unique bike, and you chatted with Dave Rome all about that. Yeah, I think I'll let you wrap up. This is your podcast. That's the end of my questions for you. You wrap up this episode, and we'll see everybody next time.
Well, I think the only way to wrap it up is just, again, to thank everybody who has supported and donated and taken the time to consider how serious food allergies are now. And I know a lot of people messaged me just saying that I hadn't realized how serious a thing this was. So, thank you to everyone who did any of that. And yeah, I think I'm going to take some time off the bike now.
Well, good news. Tour de France is here. You will be taking time off the bike.
Yeah, I have zero choice in the matter. But I don't see myself getting back on a bike before the tour, and then I don't see myself getting on a bike during the tour. So it's going to be a while.
That's ideal. I think it's good for you. Give that poor Achilles a rest, my man. All right, we'll see you next time. Performance Process. Thanks, everybody, and thank you, Ronan, for the inspirational ride and all the info. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you.